having some connectivity issues. I think she's back. She's back. Prashanta, you need to unmute.
I'm sorry about the network issues, challenges of this online platform. I hope the connection is stable during the webinar. So yeah, without any further delay, let us start the webinar. So let me first start with the introduction of our panelist today. So the first panelist we have is Dr. Thambu Maniam. Dr. Thambu Maniam is Emeritus Professor of Psychiatry at the National University of Malaysia. He is also a practitioner psychiatrist trained in cognitive behavioral therapy at the University of Edinburgh. He has an extension diploma in theological studies from the Malaysia Bible Seminary and served as an elder of the Emmanuel Evangelical Free Church in Kuala Lumpur. He has retired from academic work, and these days he's more focused on preaching and teaching the Bible, besides spending more time with his family and his beloved granddaughter. Thank you, Dr. Maniam, for joining us. Second, we have Ms. Antonia Ratnakala. She is a professional social worker with over 25 years of experience in the sector of HIV and AIDS and domestic violence. She is one of the founding members of the Institute for Family Wellbeing in Bangalore, a non-profit organization that provides shelter, vocational training, counseling, advocacy, and job placement for the survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. Antonia currently acts as a director and managing trustee of IFW. Antonia completed her master's in theology from the University of Wales. And third, we have Rupa Pradhan Chetri from Nepal. She is a social activist and a psychologist by profession. She is the founder of Torrent Counseling Private Limited that fight against human trafficking by bringing together similar organizations to empower and equip everyone to fight human trafficking. They also work to empower the community to be resilient to stand against trafficking. Thank you to all the three panelists for accepting our invitation. So we'll start with the webinar now. And just to give you a brief overview, we will be having a question and answer. We will be having question and answers after the webinar. So we have allocated 15 minutes as of now, but if there are more questions, we might extend 15 minutes more. And then we do have a short poll at the end of the webinar. So we request everyone to please participate in that poll as well. So moving on to the topic. So mental health. So across South Asia, we have heard of growing concerns of common mental health problems, such as depression and anxiety, to severe cases of psychosis and suicides recently, especially and across South Asia, we have seen that these cases have heightened during this COVID pandemic. So we are interested to hear from our panelists today the reasons behind this. What could be the contributing factors to increasing mental health problems in South Asian context? Dr. Maniam, can you shed a light on this?
Thank you. Hi, welcome everybody. Before we talk about the contributory factors, we have to address the question, is there a real increase in the prevalence of mental disorders? To answer this, actually, we need very good population-wide studies over a period of time. 20 years ago, how many people had, 10 years ago, how many, now how many, and then we can see whether there's a real increase or not. Just looking, just cross-sectionally at any one time is difficult to say, but it is our perception that more and more people seem to be having mental disorders. But is this because people are becoming more aware of mental disorder and therefore they are coming forward much more now? That's one possibility. People are more educated and they are more exposed through the media on issues about mental health. So they may recognize this that they may have a problem and they seek help. So it may be due to help-seeking behavior, or is it because our doctors and healthcare workers are detecting it more frequently now compared to before? You know? So there are many reasons why we are seeing more cases. But I think for those of us who work in mental health field, there is a very strong perception that there is an actual increase in number. And there are some studies here and there that say that the percentage of depression and anxiety has increased greatly. And recently, an Australian survey showed that after the COVID pandemic started, there are 2-3-fold increase in depression, in anxiety, in anger, in despair, domestic abuse, and so on. So there may be indications there is a real increase. So what contributes to this? When it comes to mental disorders, there is no one single cause. It is, but some factors are more important than other factors. There are multiple factors that come together to bring about, to precipitate an illness. So let me start with the biological causes like genetics, brain injury, biochemical abnormalities, medical illnesses. All these things contribute to people becoming mentally ill at some time in their lives. Persons with medical illnesses are more likely to develop depression, for example, and people with mental disorders like depression and schizophrenia more likely to develop medical illnesses as well. So it's a two-way relationship. But what is important also for us to recognize the psychosocial causes, not just the medical causes, but the psychological and social causes, such as childhood trauma, childhood neglect and abuse, parental, marital disharmony, excessive stress, and we all talk about stress. Everybody talks about stress now, and stress is a big contributor, especially in precipitating illnesses. Things like sleep deprivation. So many people are so caught up with the small screen, the phones that they have, the computers and so on. They are sleep deprived. They sleep less now, and sleep deprivation is very harmful for mental health. And then we have things, certain kinds of personality predisposes to illness, or negative thinking. If you're somebody who is prone to thinking negatively and pessimistically about events that happen to you, then you're more likely to develop depression, for example. So these things make people more vulnerable to illness. Usually a number of these factors interact with one another, leading to a mental health problem. And so people have these kind of issues, and then something like the COVID-19 pandemic hits them. And so if you're already vulnerable, and now you have to face a new threat, and the COVID-19 is a big threat in many ways. Some studies indicate that people have become more insecure. They become more angry, more anxious, more depressed. There's a lot of uncertainty about life. Will I get sick? Will my family members fall ill? Will I lose my job? Will my company collapse? And what will I do later? And so on and so on. This uncertainty produces in some people depression, anxiety, despair. And in situations like this, some people who are prone may engage in suicidal behavior. And I've heard about one doctor who was diagnosed with COVID-19 infection in America, and soon after that, she committed suicide. So people respond in different ways. Not everybody responds the same way. As I said, there are so many factors. So these are some of the contributory factors that we want to talk about. Okay, Prasansa. You're muted.
Thank you, Dr. Maniam, for explaining about the biopsychosocial factors of mental health, and also touching a bit upon the COVID situation. So one of our participants who had registered was curious to know what kind of impact does the long lockdowns may have on children and elderly and like whole general population. So Ms. Rupa, would you like to add anything to this?
Yes, I think it's going to have a long impact if we don't understand, like the community and also the people, what they're going through, because we are social being. And I think the word social distancing is to be removed, I think. Because the word that has come on our mind has affected us a lot, because our children, sometimes they think that they won't be able to meet their friends at all because it's social distancing, but actually it's not social distancing. They are communicating over phone, they are having online classes. It's just a term that we use. And the other thing is like getting a time. If we don't spend a time with the children, because we are social being, if we don't spend time with the children, if we don't plan it out in a way we used to, then they will be engaged in the computer, and the computer is not responding to them, right? And we don't know what's happening on the other side. So it is going to have a long impact on their mind if we don't handle it properly. But as a family members, if we can sit together and spend some time and plan it out well and have an emotional talk, because they are also social being, and sometimes we forget the children and we treat them as a children, and we think that they are not a human being and they are kids. They just have to study online and they have to do what the school says, and that is going to impact them a lot mentally, because their emotional needs will not be met. The physical needs will not be met because they want to have physical exercises, they want to talk with somebody, they want to share their feelings. So if we don't listen to them and if we don't spend time with them, then it is going to have a long impact in their life, and they will be lonely and they will not learn to communicate. So their brain will not be activated. But if we handle it well, it's not going to have a mental impact in their health, but it is going to be a wonderful time, a relationship building with them. So we will be discussing on that also, about changing the belief system of the people in today's time.
Thank you, Mr. Ba. WHO has also recently come up with, to use the term physical distancing rather than social distancing, as it has, only increased fear and vulnerability to some of the people who are already undergoing through some mental health problems. So thank you on touching on that as well. So Ms. Antonia, as you are someone who is working on the ground with survivors of domestic violence, do you see some connection between domestic violence, sexual assaults, and mental health?
Yes, domestic violence has increased quite a bit during this COVID-19 situation. And the main thing is when the families are splitting and they're not able to come back together, children are affected, women are affected, and sometimes this whole domestic violence itself is because of undiagnosed mental health issue. And in our culture, that people don't talk about it, they don't talk about their emotions, okay, and that they are so afraid to do because other people will judge them. So quickly, when even in a church setup or generally when somebody is trying to talk about their vulnerabilities, we are very quick to give them advice instead of listening and empathizing with them and validating. We are just ready-made answers are there, so they don't have ventilation. And other thing what I found in my work is when women have mental health, the family is very quick to get them married off. So that the person becomes somebody else's problem. What they don't realize is when they get married, they will have children who may have mental health issues also. And that is something, is not talked about, even in spite of the fact we've advised them that woman feels incomplete. She has to be married off. So they hide the fact sometimes that the person has mental health issue. In some cases, genuinely, they don't know there is mental health issue. So what happens when stress increases and where violence starts, and the especially the spouse doesn't feel safe to be in that space, and so she tries to distance herself, and then the person with mental health issue, they start using violence, and then the wife is denying sex, they say, but sex is making oneself vulnerable, and here throughout the day you are in total tension with this person, and then how can you make yourself vulnerable? And so what happens, sometimes rape within marriage happens, or violence is used to get sex, or to get their way done. So this is happening, and there is a huge stigma about medication. Oh, if I take medication, I'm not mad. Why should I take medication? So we try to explain to them, because brain is just a part of the body. Like if you have heart problem, if you have diabetes, if you have kidney problem, you go to the doctor, take medication. Brain is also part of the body. So why there should be stigma about it? It needs medication so that you can be a lot more functional with it. So there is a lot of correlation between domestic violence and mental health. And we find in the last 10 years that I'm running the shelter, I find there's a lot more mental health cases coming these days.
Yeah, thank you, Antonia. Yeah, as you have rightly mentioned, even the data suggest in South Asian context, women are 2 to 3 times more vulnerable than male to mental health problems in our context. So yes, there are many issues around it, and I guess we will be able to dig into much deeper during this webinar. So you have also briefly talked about our Christian community stigma around it. Now let's focus on our Christian community. I don't know what it's like in other countries, but right after the major earthquake in Nepal in 2015, we had conducted one study, and it showed that comparatively Christian communities had less mental health problems than people of other faiths. So, Dr. Maniam, what are your thoughts on it, being someone with a strong clinical experience and also serving at the church? Do you agree on this? Why not?
Well, that's a very interesting question. There are a number of studies in Western countries, in US and so on, where they have found that people who go to church and people who pray and who have a church community, they generally have less mental health problems and compared to those who don't have that. And these studies are mostly among Christian populations because of the Western country situation. I have seen very few or hardly any studies coming out of other religious communities. So we don't know whether the same thing happens in other communities, because they also may get community support and things like this. So it is I think, interesting that your study also found something similar. However, we also have to look at it from the scientific point of view. How was this sample selected? Were Christians, more likely to be participants in the study or respond in a certain way? So there are a lot of other scientific questions which I cannot talk about without looking in detail at what the study is like. But I won't be surprised, though. I won't be surprised, because you see, Christianity offers us not merely a religion. It offers us, one, a relationship with God, and it offers us a relationship with the family of God, a community of faith, and which supports each other. And these are things very important for our mental health. And they have found, for example, studying patients who are going for surgery, that if they are praying and they are from the church and they have strong religious faith, what we call internal faith, not just external faith like religious. Oh, there's some. Sorry. Sorry, I heard some disturbances, some sounds. Let me go back. So they found that studies amongst patients who are going for surgery, if they had strong faith, they recovered from the surgery faster than those who didn't have, And so this tells us that it's important for people to engage in spiritual activities like prayer, relatedness to God, and to a family of God's people, because this is emotionally supportive. See, we must remember, and I'm very glad that Rupa pointed out that this is not social distancing. This is physical distancing, as WHO is now saying. Physical, that's true. I was thinking about this earlier also. It's wrong to say social distancing, but whatever distancing there is, we have no distancing from God. We are not distanced from God. God is always near to us, you see. And so recourse to our faith and to our God and a true relationship with Him will always produce emotional stability, reduce our anxiety. See? And so I think that study maybe that you're mentioning adds some strength to these findings elsewhere, that we know about how faith helps people remain well and recover faster.
Yeah, I also totally believe what you said. Like, the hope we find in the Word of God, and also the strong sense of
Yes.
community and fellowship within the Christian community might have also contributed to well-being.
Sure.
Maybe one of the positive coping strategies, I believe.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, so as Antonia has already briefly touched upon this issue, so there are also cases where Christians struggling with mental health problems, they have been ashamed of having that problem, and there are a lot of misconceptions and stigma around it. Ms. Rupa, would you like to explain what are some of the misconception and stigma we see in our Christian communities when it comes to mental health?
Yes, I can share that. In fact, let me share one slide there. Just give me a second. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So basically, because we are not, most of us, I don't know, but I can say most of us are not born Christians, born in a Christian family. So sometimes our belief system affects us a lot, because we have our own belief system, and it has a strong hold in our brain that this is what we believe. And in those days, in the past days, mental health means it's like pagal. That's extreme word that we take it. So no matter how much we know about the Word of God, and as a doctor pointed, if we have a spiritual connection with God and intimate connection, then yes, there won't be stigma. But then if we have a strong belief system of the past, of the mental health is a worst thing, and we are not aware of that, that is a social stigma. How can a Christian have a mental problem? How can we have a disorder? Maybe that is a sin, because everything is related with sin, because we are in the fallen world. And because we are not being aware that, as Antonia said, the brain is part of the body, and there's internal sickness as well, there's stress. And so these things are not being aware of. And so that's why I think the education system and the way we are brought up and the way we have spiritual world is disconnected from the mental health. So I think that is a problem, because too spiritual and not understanding everything also affects our day-to-day life. So here, if you see, I've written that, we need to understand that, because my belief system and my own story and my culture also affects a lot. Where am I? Or maybe if I share this, because I've already shared in the world that if you become Christian, then you will be healed from every diseases, you will have no problem, you will have nothing. So that's your belief system. And now when I am mentally stressed, then what am I supposed to share? Or it's going to bring a bad testimony to Christianity or something like that. So it's a belief system, and it affects our brain a lot. And then we are asked to stay silent. Depends upon the culture also. In which culture are we in? Because in our culture, we don't share anything that happens inside, because we wear masks. We wear masks. But then we need to be aware because we are not aware that everybody has a black dog. It's just that you need to manage stress, you know. So it really affects us. So I think what I would like to share is, yes, the social stigma is there, and people don't share because they think that people are going to laugh at me, and people are going to, and in fact recently also there was someone from one believer was there, and whose families are not believer. That means like from coming from other religion, and the kids were Christian. So, and she was having some mental problems, but she was feeling shy to tell at home, because she thought if I share at home, then my families who were stopping me from becoming Christians will laugh at me, and if I share, then this is going to put my God down. So that is the stigma. That is not only about the society stigma, but it's a stigma of what will happen to my Christianity, what will happen to my testimony. So then what happens? Then the negative thought, it's my sin, it's my fault, people are going to laugh at me. And then the feeling of depression and shame comes, and then it comes out in a behavior. So they isolate themselves. So that's why I think they're not being able to handle well, and that stigma is there. It is there because people laugh, and in fact, like I also come from a Christian family. I'm a daughter of a pastor, and sometimes, you know, even in our church, sometimes when we talk about so and so has a problem, like when I say I'm a psychologist, they wonder, do you need to be a psychologist? Do we need a Christian psychologist? Why do we need it? Then I remind them, why did God say in Romans, renew your mind? Renew your mind. That means the negative thoughts are all around us. But then it's because everything is related with sin. That's why they feel it very shy to share what has happened to them, because they think it's because of their sin this has happened to them. So I think that is the stigma that we have, and we need to wipe up that stigma from this society. That's all I think I have to share.
Yeah. So not just in Christian community, but in general community as well. When it comes to mental health, like people have this thought like, oh, so and so has gone mad. The terms we use to refer people with mental health problems, such as crazy, loony, these are all stigmatizing and may prevent people from opening up about their problems. And also in Christian community, as you have also shared, like, you know, sometimes there is understanding that lack of faith causes mental health problem, lack of faith causes depression. So those stigma surely does impact a person. And I would like to ask Miss Antonia to shed some light on what impact does stigma have on people, especially Christians struggling with mental health problems.
When there is a mental health problem and they don't come out, they don't talk about it, what happened? They continue with mental health without any treatment. Then when they continue to pursue, they go to the pastor, they ask the pastor to pray about it, because sometimes it is interpreted as demonic. Sometimes everything is demonic. Otherwise, no, there is no demon at all. But then as believers, you know, we cannot be possessed, but, you know, like a roaring lion, he walks around us and we can get attacked. So, but putting everything into demonic angle is unacceptable. So these try to find a spiritual solution for a psychiatric problem. For example, there was a girl who was brought to me, and when our psychiatrist assessed, she was retarded, mildly retarded, and because of that, she was not able to understand what her parents were telling, and she was rebelling, and they would beat her up quite badly, and that's how she ran away and came to us, and then we had to take her for to see the psychiatrist, and then the mother said, how come for 10 years I've been telling my pastor would pray for her and said the demonic thing, it will go away like that for 10 years. So it also shows lack of understanding from the clergy side, that everything is not necessarily demonic. If it's psychiatric problem, it affects individual's life. They have failed the relationship because they are struggling with this emotional problem, this adjustment problem, they're not able to cope up with stress, and people don't understand, so they usually have, and it affects their studies, it affects their employment, if it affects their family relationship, spouse can't live with them, and then it leads to separation, divorce, and children suffer. Then sometimes when the spouse is so demanding and there's so much tension at home, then the other spouse get involved in marital extramarital affairs, or like I shared previously, they are forced to get married. Sometimes they disclose what is the actual problem, sometimes they don't even disclose, because being married is very important, that tag. Then unwanted pregnancy, see, when they have mental health issues, and then that is interpreted as arrogance, and then this person walks out and lives in the platform, and somebody rapes, and they are being robbed, and they get into trouble with the law and the jail term, they lose custody, they get trafficked because they're sometimes wandering on the street. And then if they get raped, then the potential danger of HIV, STD, poverty, homelessness. Then many hours of counseling, sometimes come to the God's anointed, don't go to the lawyers, don't go to the counseling, like that I've heard some preachers say. But then many hours of counseling may not help you, because the brain is, they're not very stable, they need that medication to be more stable. After that, when you counsel, they'll be able to listen to you. But so medication is important in some cases. And what happens, even among Christian workers, I've seen they spend with all sincerity, well-meaning but ill-informed, with all sincerity they invest in the person, praying for that person, and interpreting that as a demonic issue, and then they don't see much change happening, and they get demotivated as a Christian worker, and then they lose faith, or sometimes they leave ministry, they feel like a failure. But so there is, I feel, this so much teaching is needed within the church. You can be a believer and still have mental health issue, and like how you get cancer or heart problem, this is just a problem in the brain, so you can be affected by that. And with all the situation we are going through, we don't have to live a life of secrecy, because if there is help available within the Christian community, it will be wonderful. Then what happened, they feel ashamed, fear, then there is um, sometimes I've seen they go through the Bible college, having mental health, come out of it, and they are involved in ministry, and they can do more damage, by to the flocks, because sharing things, and when they are struggling with so many things, and human rights violation happens with the mental health issue, discrimination, stigma, so much happening, because there is a holy hush about it. People don't feel safe to share their vulnerability within the Christian circle. And so that is, we have to go a long way, but at least it's good that we are talking about it and breaking the silence about it.
Yeah, I think we also need to understand a person from a holistic perspective, not just from spiritual dimension, but from as an emotional being, as a physical being. So there are like a lot of dimensions to it, and just focusing on one and ignoring the other might sometimes create, won't be a solution to the problem. So thank you. And also you touched upon the understanding of misinterpreting some symptoms such as hallucinations, delusions are mostly understood to be signs of being possessed by evil spirits, especially in Christian community. So it's very tricky, Dr. Mariam, since you are a practitioner, a psychiatrist, and also a church leader. Can you tell us how can we differentiate demonic possession from mental health problems?
Yes, it's a very interesting question, very difficult question. Does demonic possession exist? Yes, it does. Is it real? It is real. My practice, I've seen maybe 2 or 3 cases, not too many. I've practiced for nearly 40 years, only a few cases. It is real, it's found in the Bible, the Bible teaches about it, so we know it is true. But it is rare. I think in usual clinical practice, it is not very common. It is rare. And this is an answer that Dr. John White gave to me. When I was training as a psychiatrist, I happened to attend a seminar by Dr. John White. And so I don't know if any of you heard of him. Dr. John White was a Canadian consultant psychiatrist working at the university there. He was a missionary before in South America, and he's the author of a number of books. Some of his books are quite famous, and you might want to read about depression, The Masks of Melancholy. It's a very interesting book. And then he has some Christian books, which are highly regarded Christian books on Nehemiah and so on. Anyway, I asked him at this seminar, how do you differentiate between demonization or demon possession and schizophrenia, for instance, psychotic illness with hallucinations and delusions? And this was his answer. He said, I can't tell the difference. That's what he said. I can't tell the difference. But the important thing is this. It is far more common to suffer from a psychiatric illness, from schizophrenia. It is far more common. It's rare to have a demonized case, demon possession. And therefore, since we find it difficult to tell the difference, it is safer and kinder to treat the person as having an illness, while at the same time, people can pray for them. But treat them, because if you don't treat them, you delay. And then the longer you delay, the worse the prognosis becomes. See, for schizophrenia, if you left untreated for a year, the outcome is very poor. Whereas if you treat early, the outcome is very much better. And so his advice was treat, but people can pray for them. That's all right. That's not a problem. I have found in my own practice, people who have been told by their church leaders, their pastors, oh, this is due to demons. And they have been casting out demon after demon, and for months and months and months. And the person doesn't get well. And they continue doing this. And finally, the family brings them to us, to me, for example, and I see this person has all the classical symptoms of schizophrenia. I put them on a medication, and within 2 weeks, they are well. See? And all that time was wasted for a young man remaining ill, which affects his final recovery. So, and I asked this family member, the sister who brought this patient to me, I said, what did the pastors say? The pastors claim they had the gift of discernment of spirits, and they can tell that this is an evil spirit. But actually, they were wrong. So I have become very, very, very careful about this. So I think it is safer to treat people first. And let the pastors pray. That's okay. There's no harm. God is not offended if we treat people and then people ask God for help. After all, when we treat people, it is God who is the healer. It is God who heals. He uses us as his instruments to give medicine and so on. Actually, Christians have recognized this for a long time. It's just that we have not truly studied our own history. You see, if you go back 400 years or 400 years back, if you heard about Baxter, Richard Baxter, he was one of the great theologians of the Puritan era, and he has written about it. He said there are physical illnesses, problems of the brain, or that cause illness to some people. Then there are others, of course, due to spiritual causes and so on. So for those with the physical kind of illness, you must go to the doctor. It's And if it's clear it is a spiritual problem, then of course you also seek the spiritual healing. So they recognized it long ago that you cannot just lump everybody into being spiritual and so on. The cause being demons and so on, and it does a lot of harm. I think it is important to teach our people who are training to be pastors. In fact, in Malaysia now, one of the Bible seminaries, the Malaysia Bible Seminary, invites us, psychiatrists, every year to come and teach their training pastors about mental disorder. So they can recognize it and refer it to the right place. So we teach them about depression, we teach them a little bit about anxiety, about also the serious illnesses like schizophrenia, and about suicide, how to deal with suicidal people. Because if a person is suicidal and the pastor thinks that this is due to demons and then they keep on praying, well, down the line the person commits suicide. And a life is lost, you see, because the person's depression wasn't treated. So I think it was actually a very good step taken by the seminary that invites psychiatrists to go and teach their trainees. Just one module, 30 hours or something like that. It's a substantial module, and they have to sit for tests, exams, and so on. So we do that. I would encourage, if you have contact with people with Bible schools, teach the young people, young pastors who are training to become full-time workers and so on, so they can identify this, because it's far more common to get a mental illness than to be possessed by demons. You see, it's rare. Anyway, as Christians, we must be careful before we call somebody being demon possessed. You see, we are Christians who have the Holy Spirit in us, and it is not you can't simply or easily say the person has a demon. So my answer is that yes, it is true, it happens, but it is rare. It's far more common to be mentally ill due to one of the other reasons we have been talking about. So it's safer to treat people, and in all cases, we pray anyway.
Yeah, very true. Maybe it's much safer to go hand in hand, like, spiritual support could be there, and together concurrently we can also initiate treatment, psychiatric treatment, so that
Sure.
be a much safer option. And I do appreciate
Yeah.
the step the seminary has taken to at least teach the Christians at least to be able to identify and maybe refer cases. So I think that's a very good step. This will also lead us to our next question, like how can the church help or play a role in accommodating people with mental health problems, especially in our churches? The global data also shows that 1 in every 4 people will suffer from mental health problems at any point of their lives. So especially this may especially be true in the current context of COVID pandemic, where job loss, domestic violence, fear about future is very much prevalent. So Ms. Antonia, would you like to share like what could be the church's role in helping people with mental health problems? You're on mute.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So first, the pastors and the church leaders, they need to increase their awareness about mental health and be sensitive to various culture, ethnic, religious, racial, and language diversity, because that also is very important with respect to that. Then help the congregation to see that mental health problems are in the world, but it's also within the church. Church is not exempt from mental health issues, because the data says 1 in 4 people suffer with mental health. So that awareness and that acceptance should be there, that is there in the church, within the church, in their church's neighborhood. And then they have to use the pulpit ministry in their sermons. They have to use illustration and teaching material to in such a way that people suffering with mental health issues, they should feel safe to come and share it with the pastor, or if they are on medication, to share that they will not be ostracized, they will not be sidelined by the church community. And also in the teaching, in general, by and large, in a lot of independent churches, we hear that life is going to be wonderful when we are in the Lord, everything will be fine. But when they are growing up in this teaching, then when they face suffering, they think God has rejected me. You know, I prayed, I fasted, I did that, I did this is not happening, and they go into depression. But instead, they, you know, the whole teachings about suffering, and the whole people carry a lot of baggages like forgiveness. So forgiveness is an act of love. You know, when we forgive, there is a new starting. So these teachings and all should be part of the pulpit ministry. Then training and training materials for pastors and lay workers within the church settings. Then weekly seminars on other related topics like domestic violence, abuse, parenting, trafficking, conflict resolution, anger management. So many topics are there. So, you know, now we have all these Zoom meetings, and, you know, a lot of other teachings can go on, so that they know what is happening in the world, and then they know what the Bible talks about it also. Use posters, information packet to alert the church attenders to the seriousness of mental health issue. And then there people should know who to go to, you know, be very explicit in helping, so that people know where to turn to for help. Then help men and women learn to be sensitive, patient, and listen to each other, and be interested in the lives of other people within the church community. It's very important. You know, we are talking about love and true care. And that's why when Dr. Maniam was talking, you know, within the church, when they get that love and care, then their mental health needs to some extent, you know, are addressed. And yeah, there is a positive side to that. Then when you promise confidentiality, ensure you mean it, because that's one reason many people won't disclose about it, because it just spreads like a wildfire. Then we can have prayer partner system, we can have buddy system, buddy, two people looking out for each other's well-being. We can have tea group where they can, you know, in a group session, they can talk about a topic. And so they find ventilation, they find outlet, they find a group that they belong to, everyone within the church. Solution clinic, mentors, spiritual coach. Then young people nowadays, they like to listen to, not necessarily from the church hierarchy, they may like from another younger person, you know. So encourage young leadership, and mentor them, prepare them. Then practical acts of kindness, so that people know that we care about them, to ease their pain by providing practical help, like they may need childcare, they may need they, you know, they don't have a bed for a night, they, you know, just invite them, give them a bed and a referral, suggestion, some groceries, transportation for medical appointment, a listening ear. This sort of support network will surround them. That reinforces that we belong to a community connectedness. You know, we belong, church is a community, caring community, a healing community. And then learn to rejoice with those who are happy, and sad with those who are weeping.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing us a really good list of practical actions that we can take to address mental health. Um, one of our participants was interested to know how can we help someone with suicidal ideation, like what practical steps can we take towards suicide prevention. So Ms. Rupa, can you add something on it?
Yes. So that is actually, it's a burning issue. Even in Nepal, many people died out of suicide than out of COVID. And why is that happening is one thing, right? Because they don't want to commit suicide. They needed someone to talk to, and they will not just commit suicide. They will try the best to connect to somebody. But are we available? That is the first question. Are we available, or are we condemning them? You know, so the first step that we need to, sorry, something happened with my computer. Okay. So we need to help them. We need to be there to listen to them. Sometimes what happens is we sideline them and say, oh, I don't want to pick up that call because that person is going to trouble me. Or I don't want to listen to that call. It's really irritating. I won't be able to have. So those are the things that is in our mind, and the judgment comes in. So first thing that we need to be there is to listen to them. Maybe we are the last resort, or maybe you are the last resort. So that is one. The other thing is listening to them and showing them the purpose of their life. There was one girl, actually I can tell that story. There was one girl who wanted to commit suicide. She had been sharing with everybody and the people were not listening to. And finally, then that client came to me. And the one thing that I asked was, why do you want to end life? What is it that you want to see? So she wanted to see who loves her. And then she said, but how, I asked, how will you know once you commit suicide that who loved you? And then she said, well, my soul will be flying up in the air and then I can see who's crying, who's happy, who will say what not to me. So those are the things, you know, these are teenagers because they have no one to talk to. There's no one to listen to them. Every time they're saying that nobody understands me, nobody listens to me. So just listening to them and being on their side, it's one first step that we can take. The other thing that we can do is, even if they don't try to communicate with us, but if we can see some behaviors, some signs, we can just send a message saying, hey, I care for you. I'm there for you. I love you. Is there any way that I can be there for you? I can listen to you. Take your time, but please notice that we are there. So that kind of assurance we can give. And the other thing is, let them come out of the box and see the situation. Let them explain to them without judging, you know, just let them share whatever they want to share. Write it down on a paper and then let them come out from the box and then let them see the situation. And then let them ask questions to them and say, okay, if you were in this situation and you want to help that person who wants to commit suicide with all these problems that is on their table, how would you help? So that will give you the sign and a signal to say that this is the way I actually need help. So those are the things that we need to remember. And I really like the prodigal son story. As a kid, I've been hearing only about the son who went away from the home and who did everything possible and who came back home. And so we were shared as a kid that, oh, the son came back in repentance and the father, heart of God, father was waiting for the son, and the son, father went running to the son, and the son, whatever negative thoughts he had, you know, to ask forgiveness and to this, father was so forgiving that he has forgiven everything. So that was God's role and the son role who came back in repentance. But our role was the brother's role. The brother was complaining. The brother was not happy that the brother came back, the one who left the home and came back. And he was complaining to the father, oh, I was with you, daddy. I was doing this for you, daddy. So now you are doing this for this brother who came back. So sometimes we become that brother, the brother who was with daddy, the brother who goes to church every time. The brother becomes judging. So we need to come out from that mentality. We need to come out, because if God can accept us, you know, so people have mental health. So they just don't want to commit suicide actually, but they didn't find any hope. They thought they're worthless, they're useless. But if we can just listen to them, one person who listens to them and make them understand and make them feel that they're worth it, will bring a changes in their life. So that is the only thing that we can do. Even if we cannot counsel, we don't have to be a psychologist, clinical psychologist, or father or pastors or whatever. But as a brother, as a sister, as a friend, just being there and listening to them who had been neglected. They might have felt neglected, they might have felt rejected. They cannot see, because I think I put that slide where it talks about thought, the feelings, and the behavior. The thought that came was, oh, I'm not loved. I'm useless, I'm worthless, I'm neglected, nobody loves me. And the feelings is like worthless. what is the use of staying? I'm the one who brings shame to my family. I'm the one who's not being able to do anything. I'm the one who's done this. And the behavior is commit suicide. But if we can reinforce the thoughts and of the things that person has done, wow, you came back in repentance. You tried your best. You realized you're worth it. And that empowers them with the feelings. Yes, I'm worth it. The self-esteem goes up. And once self-esteem goes up, one step can make a difference in the behavior. And that behavior is trying to connect with the people, and they will share once you build the trust. And the thought is, I have to live because I have a good life, a life that has a good future, because God has a good plan for each one of us. And everybody makes a mistake. Even I'm a sinner, everybody's sinner, nobody's perfect. If you can reassure that, that will uplift that person. But if you don't pick up a call, if you don't send a message, and if you judge, definitely maybe I am the one who has encouraged that person to commit suicide. So that thing we have to keep in mind. So I think I would leave with this note.
Thank you, Ms. Rupa. It's a very simple step and everyone can do their part. You don't have to be a professional mental health worker in order to help people with mental health problems or suicidal ideation. Thank you for explaining those simple steps that everyone can, just do it right away. So yeah, we are nearing the end of the webinar. So if our participants have any questions to our panelists, you can write down in the chat box. We will try to attend to your questions at the end of the webinar. So so as I said earlier, so we are nearing the webinar. So I would like to ask each of our panelists to give a takeaway message to all our participants. Let's start with Antonia. You're on mute.
So one thing I would like to see happen is that the sacred and secular work together, because years of neglect, years of issues, one single-handedly church alone cannot handle it. So but then many of the people with the health issues, mental health problem, they reach out to the pastor. So it's very important that the church reaches out to psychologists, psychiatrists, and social workers, lawyers, and work together along with they definitely need, church does have a very important role to play. Like Jeremiah 20:22 says, applying the balm of Gilead, which means we have to proclaim good news to the poor, bind the hearts that have been ripped apart by loneliness, disappointment, pain, comfort those who mourn, placing on the downcast a garment of praise, offering everlasting joy to those who feel shame. And in essence, we are talking about, hope to endure, which is love. Unfortunately, the centrality of the spirituality should be love, but it has been now the whole culture is left behind, the loving culture. There's so much pursuit for money is there, so people don't have time. And because of that, Bible says clearly we cannot serve two masters, both mammon and God. So we have to uh, work, take advantage of the experts who are available within the community to address this issue, and not monopolize the whole intervention. And sometimes it can end up in death, and it's very sad when that happens. So sacred and secular should work together.
Thank you. Dr. Maniam, your takeaway message?
Yeah, I think what the two previous panelists have said, I concur with that. It's very important. I want to underline one thing. All help begins first by us listening to people. I think without the ability to listen properly, we cannot provide proper help later on. And so I want to emphasize that listening is a skill, that people must learn how to listen properly. Listening is not the same as just hearing what they are saying. And so I put it under a number of points. Firstly, we must listen attentively. We put aside other things, our phone and other distracting things, and pay attention to the people who are talking to us. They may be suicidal, may be depressed, they may be abused and distressed people, but we give them our attention. That is a mark of our love for them, that you are a person who is important, worthy enough for me to pay attention to you. And so we must listen with attentiveness. Secondly, we must listen with empathy, trying to put ourselves in the person's shoes and try to understand what are they feeling. We not only listen to the words they are saying, but also to the feelings that they are expressing. And so what must it be like for them to face these issues, to go through these difficulties? What is it like for them? And so we try to understand that. In other words, we listen to understand, not just listen to reply. Many people listen to the words and then they want to reply straight away, give a solution, give an answer. We don't listen to reply. The replies come later. We listen first to understand what the person is facing, what is the extent of their problem, what they are going through, how bad they feel. And then I think just now, Rupa also mentioned that we are non-judgmental. We don't condemn them. Sometimes people tell us things, they have done terrible things. It is true, they have done terrible things, but it's important for us to listen to it without, expressing a sense of judgmentalism or condemnation, even if they have done wrong things. Okay? So bringing these things together and listening to that, I think is the single most important skill that we bring to the situation in where the helping situation. Otherwise, we can't help people because we haven't heard them properly. So we can't provide the help that they really need. And of course, we must always remember that God is in the picture. He's intimately involved in all these things. And sooner or later, we need to bring them to that. But we don't start telling about God straight away because it'll sound like preaching to them. They say, I didn't come here to preach. All the pastors have preached to me already, you see. So we need to listen first. But eventually, sooner or later, I try to bring them to an understanding of what God may be doing in this situation. So, for example, in this COVID situation, the pandemic that we are going through, I have thought about it, and as reading the scriptures, I was struck by what God told Moses to tell the people after their 40 years of wandering in the desert. In the 40 years of wandering in the desert is no fun, It's like the pandemic, it's a wilderness. And the people suffered. There was hunger, there was thirst, and there was the heat, and there was death all the time. People were dying. The older generation was dying. And what did God tell Moses to tell the people? He said, God put you through these 40 years to do three things. One is to test your faith. Secondly, he said to humble you. And thirdly, to teach you that man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of God. In other words, teach you to live by God's word, teach you to obey. This is a basic thing. But I won't begin the counseling session with this first, because that is preaching. But sometime in the process, we want to connect them with God, you see, and connect them to see God's larger purposes. God has a big purpose for our lives, and He doesn't let us suffer unnecessarily. And He allows it so that we may learn to draw close to Him and see that He is interested to transform us into a humble people, a people of faith, a people who are obedient, a people who are Christ-like. And so we minister God's love to them through this. So I think, as I said, but we cannot come to this without listening to us, listening where they are. So that's what I'd like to say. add to what the excellent responses the other two panelists have given.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Rupa, your takeaway message to our participants today? You're on mute.
That's a challenge. We keep forgetting.
Mute.
Yes. So the takeaway message is like understanding what the people go through, as doctor already mentioned, you know, because the stress and the anxiety, it affects not only our brain, our memory, it affects our learning, it affects our behavior, it affects our body, because the pain comes in and the pain leads to various kind of diseases. And also our relationship, as Anthony has mentioned, when you are full with a lot of stress, how can you engage with your spouse or anything, right? It affects our emotions. And so if we understand all these things as a church, like Jesus did, we have to meet them where they are. We cannot expect them like, okay, now they're believers or they're Christians and they read Bible and they're fine. No, meet them where they are. Jesus met people at the point of need. That would be one takeaway. He looked below the surface with he looked below the surface with compassion and without judgment. And also God's love is the only mechanism, and that is God's unconditional love. Because if he had not given unconditional love, I don't know where we would be right now. But because of his unconditional love, there is hope, there's healing, and there's restoration. And we also have to remember the recovery takes time. It takes time. And for every individual, it's completely different. And as Antonia read out, you know, like for me, Isaiah 61, when I went into the brothels to fight the human trafficking, to bring the children, I realized the verses that I got when I was studying in UK. That was bind up the brokenhearted, proclaim freedom for the captives, release for prisoners, and comfort for those who mourn. So that is what we are supposed to do. We are supposed to bring the healings and restoration, because when we are very stressed, we don't see what is happening. So as a church, as a caretaker, as a friend, as a family of Christ, we need to meet them and help them to come out from all this pain, because that's what we can do. And once we accept them as they are, I'm sure they will start trusting us, as Anthony again said about confidentiality. So that is what I'd like to leave the note with. And I remember one of a friend from the church had shared that, oh, breathing in and breathing out, that psychologist does, you know, that is kind of yoga or something like that. But then we can take it in a different way, in a biblical way as well. Because for me, breathing in is the breath that God has breathed in us, because he breathed in us when he created us. He breathed in us. That was life that he breathed in us. We were made out of dust and he breathed in us. So that is like, okay, like I breathe in because my breath that is God's life that is being put in me. Breathing out is all the negative thoughts, is all the sin that I want to surrender to God. And that's what we can reinforce them with Bible verses. Sometimes when they are spiritual, once they are connected with God, at the end we can share, as the doctor said. But initially, when we bring God in front and say, you are the sinner, God forgives, and pray to God and kneel down and pray, that time they will say, where is God? Where is God? And I think in the Corinthians and in Philippines, it keeps saying, continue to meet and encourage one another. And I think that is what Antonia was talking about, having a community where you can share. So make a friend, find someone that you trust, and share your feelings and come together. And everybody has a black dog, but we have a control. And what is in your control, take it, because God has given you authority to control the feelings and everything. And mental health is part of our physical being. So take care of your mental health as well. Thank you.
Thank you to all our panelists and as well as our participants for your patience. So we are a little over than an hour. I see we do have like some questions in our chat box. Stephen, would you like to read them out to our panelists?
Yes, I think we have one question and a few comments. Now, Bijoy is asking, how do we use faith to communicate, connect with someone facing mental health issues without sounding too preachy? Bijoy, would you like to give little context to that, or should one of the panelists go ahead?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so often when we try and reach out to these people who, like, they may be friends, they may be family members, but at that point they're in such a dark space that using the scripture quite literally often tends to actually lead to pushback rather than them connecting. So we face that with some people in our youth groups and stuff. So, and we actually end up distancing them because they're like, I don't want to listen to this right now. So how do we try and balance the, try and help them using the faith without pushing them away? So I don't know if I've added to that, but I'm just, that's basically what I meant.
Would any of our panelists would like to attend to that question?
That's a very good question. It is we run a risk when we start with scripture or we start with telling them about how God heals everything and things like this. We sound very preachy to them, and they turn away, and that's very quite understandable. That's why I said the first and most important thing we do is we listen to them first. We have to listen to them. Sometimes the whole session that you spend with the person is mostly listening. See, and you find that at the end of it, some of the people say, "Thank you very much. You have helped me a lot. Actually, you didn't do anything. You just listened." You see, and that people find very helpful. Because they find that there are many other people to whom they cannot talk. People don't listen. They cannot talk. And so they find that here you are listening to their problems, asking some sensitive questions, and spend time in that. It's not a wasted time. It's only later on, then we can use the principles of scripture and bring God into the picture. Because we don't talk about God openly doesn't mean God is not there. He is there, you see. And if we are people who know the Lord, in all our interactions, that will become apparent. It will become clear to people that we are saying things from the viewpoint of our understanding of God, but we don't have to push it to people. So even if it takes a number of sessions listening to them, listen, that is, I think, in itself helpful already.
Thank you so much.
Would any of the panelists would like to add, or should we move on to the next question?
I would say that even the pastor understanding, knowing that the person has mental health issue, and the pastor willingly spending time with that person, sometimes accompanies that person to a medical appointment, a psychiatric appointment. All that is part of the ministry. That is showing love, and you're not discriminating that person, and you're saying you are going through a health issue, and I'm holding your hands and walking with you. That's very important. But what I have found is, for a person within the church, when they get that message from the pastor, no matter the counselors talks about it, psychiatrists talk about it, lawyers talk about it, but when it comes, you are precious, and you are the image bearer of Christ. When it comes from the pastor, that is so liberating for them, because basically they are struggling with the spiritual issue. Will God accept me? Am I a sinner? Am I, there is demon in me? All these things. And when the pastor befriends this person, walks with them and accepts them unconditionally and showing just love, taking for an appointment and inquiring how their day was, it means a lot for them, for a spiritual person from within the church. It brings a big breakthrough for them.
We have one more question. Is there time for that, Prashanta?
Yes, maybe we can attend to it. Maybe Miss Rupa can attend to it, and then we'll close up.
Okay. So we have a question. How do we identify and extend help to those who are battling mental health issues, anxiety and stress, which then goes on to depression and other more serious manifestations? Because many people, usually they don't show the symptoms outside or share with others what they're going through.
Yes, I think what we do, like in our church, what we did was we had a sessions, because sometimes we notice that through their behavior, or they don't want to come and talk, they isolate themselves, they switch off the phone, or when you give a call, they'll disconnect your phone. The person who is always available, they do that. And sometimes they don't want to share that. So what we can do is, instead of saying that, oh, you have a stress or you have anxiety, because they're shy to come forward, because rapport building and trust is important. So what we do is, first we psychoeducate them. What happens when you are very stressed? How will you react? And it's normal. Validating the feelings and validating everything, it's normal. And then later on, so when they identify, and then we say, if there is anybody who'd like to share with your story. And I think in a church, sharing stories and reaching out to young people also, the stories, they can relate it very well, the success stories about the stress and about everything. And then once you identify, and once they come and see, we can always come and sit beside them. And as doctor said, listening to them is one, assuring them and empathizing them. And the other thing that I always use is a metaphors. I use metaphors. There are many rooms. There are many rooms in the house, but I will not know where you are stuck. And then again, we try to give an example. When you are very stressed, when you're very stressed, you don't even see what is in front of you, and you keep asking other people, where is this, where is that? Because you're so stressed, you cannot see. But we are outside and we can see the options. Is there any way that we can help you? So unless you give your hand, I won't be able to walk you through. I'm there for you, but you need to give me your hand. How can I help you to come out? I'm there for you. So small assurance and being there and being available will help you. But only thing is, you have to build relationship, you have to build a rapport, and you have to speak their language also. Especially like for us, when we have a young people, what we do is we speak Facebook language. We speak like for relationship, when they have a relationship, we say, who is writing your love story? So that attracts them. And so these are the few things. Once you invite them in various sessions, and once you try to speak their language, they will automatically open their self, and they will come to you, and they will definitely share. But once we behave like a church leader and have a boundary and have a long distance, they will never ever come to you and share about anxiety or stress. But if you speak their language, come to their level, because sometimes we forget and we don't come to their level. Once we come to their level, then they will be able to share. But we need to keep our boundary, and that boundary will be seen only by us, not by them. But speak their language, come down to the level, and they will share. Because I have worked with so many young people, and psychoeducation has helped us to understand a lot. And we do talk about sex, which in the bigger churches we don't talk about. We do talk about lust. We do talk about hormonal changes. We do talk about what is in living relationship, what happens, so how the phone, how the hormonal changes, and what are the desires that comes. We do talk. So it all depends upon what step will you take. Once we take a step, they will come forward. But if we don't take a step, they will never come forward. So we should be willing to come forward.
Thank you. I think we don't have any more questions, or do we? Otherwise, Stephen, do we have any questions? We have come up with a poll as well, so we would like to ask our participants to spare their 1 to 2 minutes to attend to this poll. I will share that with you, so please share us your feedback, and that will help us to, you know, even improve in the further days. So, is it showing up in your screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have further more questions, you can write to our panelist. Maybe you can write to us first, and we will direct your questions to the panelist, and we'll come back to you. I will leave our email address in the chat box. I see one question. How do we overcome the separations between churches? So we will deal with this question in our next webinar. So we are coming up with different other issues, topics in the future as well. We are planning to run this webinar monthly for about a year. So we can address to your question maybe later. Anyways, thank you. All right. So thank you everyone for your active participation in this webinar. Thank you for your patience, and many thanks to our facilitators for the wonderful discussion. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. All right, I'm ending the meeting now. Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.